There needs to be a true community involvement process working on the vision for this cluster. The process we are in right now is not it. It never was designed to be it, nor was it properly staffed or supported. There is a lot of energy and passion in this cluster and in this room. Turn it around from anger and disappointment to passion and excitement. This process should include everything from school configurations to programming. We really want a long-term plan and can accept changes are coming if they are thought out and we prepare for them. Grab this involvement and dedication that you see here today and use it to the advantage of our schools. The community involvement will not always be easy, and it won't happen overnight. While the vision and plan are articulated, there are a few things that you can do. First and foremost, keep all of our buildings open. The threat of closure is literally killing this cluster. Parents of children as young as 6, actually, I heard a story this morning, parents of children of babies in their arms, flee this cluster of schools not because of what they see in the lower grades, but because of fear. In the past 20 years, how many times has the district considered closing Jefferson? Each time, it just elevates the fear. Closing one building in our cluster makes all of our schools weaker. Threatening to close a building truly does as much damage to the reputation as a full-on closure. Following the recommendation in the superintendent's letter and follow the recommendation in the superintendent's letter and rebalance the entire district at the same time. Stop this cluster by cluster nonsense. It is not working. The artificial boundaries should not prevent you from rebalancing properly. While the district is focused on the inequity and under-enrolled schools in the Jefferson cluster, there are schools across the district in just as bad of a situation. At the end of the process, implement a new transfer policy, which, whenever possible, keeps students within their own neighborhoods.
I just want to speak a minute to the transfer policy and give you a really specific example of what's happened to me in the last couple of weeks. I manage a rental property in Grant neighborhood, so Fernwood and Hollywood. And I had 2 parents in the last week call me to want to rent this house. And I didn't know them, and they said the reason they wanted to move was that they lived in North Portland and their kids were going into kindergarten and they wanted to go to a better school. And I said, not knowing, they didn't know how involved I was in this process, and I said, well, what is your neighborhood school? And one of them said Beach. And I said, gosh, I've heard really good things about Beach. Trying to keep my professionalism and not wanting to talk this woman out of renting this house. But as it turned out, just to make a long story, 40-minute conversation short, she had never been in her neighborhood school, had no idea what was going on there, didn't really know anybody in PPS. She's a working mom and she has a stay-at-home dad. I was just dumbfounded. I told her, I said, you really need to look into your school. She was willing to move her family from a home she owns to a rental house, pay $200 a month more, and she didn't even know anything about the schools that she was going to go to. I said, do you realize that your children within a year are going to be in different schools?
We want PPS to look at the big picture rather than taking things bit by bit. Don't let a myriad of piecemeal decisions form a collective storm that tears down our kids. For example, we were told that we could choose to stay, that transportation wasn't going to be an issue. But there may not be a choice. Transportation for our kids will be ending next year as part of No Child Left Behind. An unfortunate coincidence that a third of our magnet cohort will literally be left behind. Many of the very same students this plan is trying to find equity for. Another is our special ed classroom. We asked straight up if they were staying with us. First, we were told to our face that they would stay with our cohort. Then we were told that they wouldn't, that they'll be scattered. We had to find out on our own what the real deal was, and we're still not sure what the plan is. We want to improve our school, but instead of feeling a priority, we're afraid that once again, grant money promised to Ockley Green may never come. It's things like this that has hurt Ockley and this cluster. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. Individually, they may seem harmless, maybe even good sense at the time. Put them together, and we look back at these unfortunate coincidences and ask, well, how come we didn't see that coming? A question that Ockley has seemed a lightning rod for over 20 years. Closed feeders, rushed conversions, broken communities. Really? We couldn't see this coming? Those decisions don't involve enrollment balancing. Well, they should. You should let Judy off the leash and just rattle people and say, hey, you're messing up with my enrollment. Look around. We are not alone. Every time we come to this table, families are left wondering, is this the right course for my kids? Are we next? Is it any surprise people sometimes think of looking elsewhere? You want to address capture rate and transfer problems, look right in this room. Those seeds of doubt are being planted right now. What does Ockley Green want? We want to save our community, a community built on acceptance. As adults, we struggle with our own misconceptions and prejudices, but our kids can be free of the baggage we carry. When I was their age, being subject to the color of my skin was a foregone conclusion. By 5th grade, I was getting into fights at school because of it. So despite poor test scores and skeleton budgets, how valuable to me is it that my children get to spend these early years knowing that the color of your skin or the glasses you wear doesn't have to mean a punch to the face. We are a family. We came to this community by choice. Many have left, and I give them no fault for doing right by their kids, but it is a testament that some of those very same families continue to be involved and support Ockley even years after their kids have left. We're a little like the Marines that way. There's no such thing as a former dragon. We want the common goal, a strong school that provides opportunity and support for our students. If that path takes us with Chief Joseph, then we look forward to taking that path with them together. We want to honor their community and be involved with how this school will be set up, assured that it will be supported by the district to succeed.
Thank you.
We want our kids to be part of the solution, not an inconvenient obstruction. We want the buck to stop here. No more unfortunate coincidences. Let us help you steer the ship. Don't leave our kids adrift. Thank you.
When I was recruited as a staff member to come to PPS, I was so excited about the equity policy and PPS being a leader in the nation regarding equity for all of our students. And I thought I'm so happy to go to a place that works for equity for all kids, and I felt I would be really helpful here. There seems to be some structures and infrastructures that continue the inequities, particularly in the Jefferson cluster. And they seem to perpetuate the inequities that we're here to talk about today. School closures, schools being closed that have a majority of minority students, families being displaced, gentrification of an area where people are transferring out. And it seems to me that the transfer policy and the boundaries that are current in PPS seem to go directly against the equity policy that the board has put forth. It's a very, I've looked at the document, it's a very strong document, and I know it is a leading document in this nation. And as we look at the transfer policy and the boundaries, it brings me question to, are we doing what's best for all kids? In particular, at King's School, when I was talking to a black parent yesterday and asked him if he was coming here, he said that it didn't matter, that the board had made up their mind anyway, and he felt like his voice hadn't been heard. So if you don't see our black parents, don't think that they don't care about their kids or they're not showing up because they don't care about what's happening. They are very concerned, active parents at King's School, and they do care. As a person who is not originally from Portland, it seems to be the inequities and systematic inequities throughout the years have caused some of our family engagement to be at a minimal when it comes to these kinds of meetings. In particular for King. King has the smallest boundary in the district. And also, it is inequitable that the facility was used in the way that it was used. I think King's School needs a bigger boundary, and the facility should be given to the school. Thank you.
What's been going on, the abuses that have gone on in the Jeff cluster for too long are on racial lines, that the enrollment transfer policy encourages white flight, and that it needs to stop, that the best education system you can create is heterogeneous, it is mixed with white, brown, black, and somewhere in between. That is how a school thrives, that is how a school district thrives, that's how a cluster thrives. And I know that there's worry that, you know, as you stated, that they're going to sell their homes and transfer to a private school. And if that's the case, then they're part of the problem, they're not part of the solution, and so be it. Get all the families investing in their schools. And if we stop the transfer policy, they will come. They'll come and they'll invest, and it'll make everyone better. It will do great deeds to our little world to end the prejudices that exist simply out of ignorance, not out of experience. Additionally, the boundaries that exist are completely imbalanced, make no sense. I can speak directly about King, and our potential capture rate is not even enough to fulfill your numbers if we had 100%. So that needs to change. And as some others have stated, it shouldn't be just about the Jeff cluster. This needs to be, those boundaries that exist that move to our east need to go away. So it goes beyond Jefferson cluster, and it goes to creating those community neighborhood circles of boundaries so that every school, because we have a great mixed population here, and if we truly have fair boundaries and stop the transfer issues, we will have robust schools.
I don't believe that anybody's trying to be inequitable, but I do think that we've created a culture where, especially in North and Northeast Portland, families feel like they got to find the right school for their kid. And they have this perception of schools in the Jefferson cluster that are incorrect. And so it's going to take a lot of work from everybody to turn that around, but it means somehow erasing these negative perceptions from Jefferson High School on down and really singing the songs that are positive about all of these schools. And I know that that can be done, but it's going to take a lot of work from everybody.
I'm going to piggyback on Mr. Momford about the transfer policy. It's a huge issue. Just like we've dealt with the gentrification going on, I feel like that's filtering down into the school system as well. It's a predominantly African-American school with Hispanic students as well. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we have so many different cultures there. But to think that King School would close is just crazy to me. To think that Jefferson would close, it's crazy to me. It's very emotional for me to even think about it. But the other issue is this access program. My concern is that this program comes and co-facilitates with King, but there's no integrating, there's no merging of the programs and giving the other kids an opportunity to have, to be able to take part in that is disheartening to me. It sends the wrong message to our kids, like these are special kids over here, you're not special. And as a King parent, King School represents pride. It represents giving kids a sense of pride about who they are, where they're from, and giving them a sense of self-respect. And I just feel like doing that, bringing access in to use the facility, to use what's there, but not integrate and to be a part would be just a horrible thing to do. I have so many thoughts, but I want to make sure that I covered all the main points I have. My thing is I desire to see my kids have the full opportunities as any other kid. And I'm a very involved parent. I so appreciate every teacher at King. I think they're amazing teachers that care about our kids, a principal that cares about the kids in the community, and I want to see King stay. I don't want to see it go anywhere. My mother and father went to King before it was even called King. So to even think that all of these changes that are coming about, it only makes me think that this is another way of, let's just get it closed down. If we can bring this other program in, and then that kind of stifles our growth. They want to grow, we want to grow. We all need to be able to have an opportunity to grow and get those numbers up.
When this process began, the first thing we heard from Judy and from Harriet was that the goal was to create robust programs. And to do that, we had to have the numbers. I don't understand how moving access to King creates a more robust program for King. What it does is it just puts more bodies in a building. They are two different programs that will live separately in the building and not share. There may be a few overlaps, but not the kind of programs that I believe Harriet and Judy were talking about when they came to us months ago. 3 years ago, we started a transformation at King. We got new leadership. We had teachers that had made a decision that we were going to make King better than what it was. And the growth that we've made has been tremendous in our scores, but more importantly, just in the attitude and the culture at King School. And here we are 3 years later, and we're looking to change it. And for whatever reason, it's a very frustrating time when you have invested so much time and so much energy to turn a community around. And now we are looking at it again saying, okay, here's another wrinkle. And there's no doubt in my mind, no matter what happens, King School is going to be successful. But it is just another obstacle that our kids and our community has to overcome. Last, I've been told, I've heard since this proposal came out that King would be lucky to have access. I don't understand that. I don't understand why that makes us lucky. And we don't need luck at King. What we need is a bigger boundary and time to continue doing what we're doing. Because what we're doing is working, and we would just like that opportunity to continue to grow. Thank you.
When my husband and I chose to go to our neighborhood school rather than engaging in shopping for schools as many of our neighbors were, we walked into King, and quite frankly, that school was already dying, as I'm sure you already are made aware of. That school had been hemorrhaging students for years, and there are many questionable practices, like for example, having a gang facility co-located at our grade school, where it was mandatory for violent juvenile offenders to check in with parole officers. I realize that a lot has changed at King, and there's been renewed interest across the cluster to make changes in those practices, and I appreciate it. But I am a little leery about this current proposal for King, and here's why. I get that King is too small. I understand that, and I even accept that changes must happen, perhaps even closure of King. I saw firsthand how low numbers can impact a school's programming, and really what has saved our programming more than anything has been money that we have gotten from the federal government. We are alive because of the SIG grant. When that money runs out, I see what you see. I'm worried too. However, just co-locating access in our building is not necessarily an acceptable solution if it is done inappropriately. For example, imagine where you have two programs who want to grow, both of them have desires to grow, both of them have some good programming available. Both will fill our building almost to full capacity. That in and of itself creates an antagonistic situation. Further, imagine you're co-locating a program which is seen as where the smart kids go. That program is overwhelmingly white. You're co-locating it in a building that is predominantly filled with Black kids and Latino kids. That in and of itself is not an acceptable message to send to our students. If you wish to co-locate the programs, I can see how you could make it a powerful program if you chose to integrate those two programs. I myself am a teacher, and I know that differentiation is key to making great programming. If you took the Access program and pulled kids out for accelerated programming, like a pull-out program, and had King and Access share funding for specials like art and music, if you created a commingled cohort with common cause, where all teachers were looking out for all kids and we became one group, it could be a very powerful program. You have to consider not just numbers. I realize that numbers count. I've seen it with my own eyes. I appreciate that you're in a tricky situation, I truly do. But we can't separate numbers from programming. We need not just better numbers at King, we need better programming across the board and thoughtful programming. Thank you.
I support the proposal to merge the two schools and in the end close Chief Joseph. Make them integrate. We are tired of sacrificing our schools and our children of color while the predominantly white schools get to stay as they are because they know how to say it better. The district has watched Ockley Green struggle, and now it's time that they made it right. I realize that this is not everyone's position, and I don't care. They don't stay up at night worrying about my little Black boy or any of the other kids at Ockley Green who aren't getting the education they need and deserve. So no, I don't feel like starting with the premise that both schools stay open, and you can contact your realtor, I don't care, but my child deserves, and no, he has the right to education. And since I have more time, I'd just like to say that, you know, I trusted the board when they said that they was going to make sure that the kids in the feeder schools to Jefferson would be ready for Jefferson curriculum. I didn't see that happen, and I have 3 kids, one that was attending Jeff, one in middle school, and one at Ockley. And the board in the district has just not funded Ockley. I think that closing Chief Joseph and making them come to our school in a good way, right? Like, we're gonna be happy. I'm gonna be nice, and I hope to meet a lot of people, you know, but I'm just saying our school needs the funding and our school needs some help, and I think it's time that y'all made it right. I'm really glad this proposal came out. So thank you.
Superintendent Smith, I want to sincerely thank you for promoting stability for special education in the Jefferson cluster and keeping the general education community that cares for those kids inside those buildings to deepen those bonds. I hope you understand what a victory that is for our kids. Watching our Ockley community being destroyed is more than I could take. In our first 2 years at Ockley, we endured a sham of a community process for choosing leadership. Passed AYP, but the transfer letters went out anyway. Lost the art teacher at the arts and technology magnet, but we had community, and we cared about each other. We had wonderful teachers, families, students, and culture. We understood that we needed to work hard and thought that this hard work would be enough. I was trying to tell everyone in PPS I could find, you need to come and see this good thing we have here. I wrote the chief academic officer. I came to testify before the board. I wrote on PPS equity. I went to community meetings. I spoke on parent panels and kept saying, hey, we are not the bad school you read about on Urban Mamas or your friend played an 8th grade basketball game against in 1989. The feeling that we were on our own began to sink in, but we naively thought if we worked even harder, people would send their kids. The last 2 years at Ockley Green, we just kept coming back to be with the community we had built. Last year, I was approached by families there of kids with IEPs because their children were being discriminated against. I got to see that the wonderful treatment my kid with autism had was not what was really happening inside the building. Kindergartners were being suspended. Kids were sitting in the office long enough to be counted and then sent home. All those kids ended up pushed out of the building. Why would an under-enrolled school be so intentional in getting rid of kids? Why were we abandoned? Why did your staff watch a school bleeding children for 4 years and think that giving shavings of FTE from other schools would fix the problem? Why was our school chosen to die while another school nearby was chosen to thrive by closing all of our feeders but one and then just disappearing and leaving us to think that all we needed to do was work harder? And then, in the school closure process, the board finally asked this week, what does Ockley Green want? It's not right that we were left to die. It's not right that this proposal expects the school chosen to live to somehow save our community by closing down the school they love. What does Ockley Green want? We want our community to stay together. We don't want to be spread out, split up, or swallowed up. We want our dignity. We don't want to be the bad school in Jefferson cluster anymore because it's just not true. Every school in the district fails when any school gets left behind. All we want is to stay together. After all we've been through, you owe us at least that much. Thank you, and keep asking questions.
I have 2 children in the Jefferson cluster, and I agree with the district's decision to reevaluate the transfer policy to strengthen our neighborhoods. In doing so, I strongly encourage the district to seek out and interview the families who have chosen to transfer their children out of the Jeff cluster. Why are they doing so? What can PPS do to attract and maintain all the residents of our neighborhoods? That is the way to indeed build strong neighborhood schools, which truly reflect the neighborhoods in which they are located. Our schools need strong programs that meet the needs of all of the students within their boundaries. I want my children to go to a diverse, innovative, rigorous neighborhood school demonstrating 21st century learning environments. And looking at the transfer data, 49% of students choose to transfer out of the Jefferson cluster. That's a lot. That data suggests the neighborhood schools do not reflect the neighborhoods they serve. Why is that? And what is PPS going to do to attract, serve, and retain everyone?
We are here again today to talk about school closures. 2 weeks ago, our community demanded a moratorium on school closures here in Jefferson cluster. At the same time, activists from 17 cities marched on Washington with similar demands. The parallels between their complaints and our local history is unsettling. In both cases, budget cuts and test scores have been used to justify widespread disinvestment in education, targeting low-income neighborhoods and communities of color. Despite this, our schools remain the heart of our community and are tirelessly dedicated to serving our kids. Teachers have found creative ways to ensure robust programs despite ever more limited resources. Students continue to find inspiration, challenge, joy, and refuge within our walls. Our loyal community has never stopped supporting our schools and have scraped and schemed to find paths to success despite the enormous challenges that we face. Yet we're here again today, again discussing how we will next disinvest in our community. Even as the school-age population soars in our neighborhoods, we are asked to decide which of our schools to close. This is not the path that we want. Let's not follow Detroit and Philadelphia. Instead, Portland can start a new trend in public education based on the principles of equity, stability, and strong communities. Members of the school board, what will be your legacy? 2 weeks ago, we asked you to close no more schools in our cluster. Closing schools doesn't save money. It certainly does not close the achievement gap. We will never make progress by pushing struggling students from building to building, concentrating greater need in fewer spaces, with resources ever more scarce. Closing Chief Joseph is no better a solution than closing Vernon or Woodlawn. Instead of closures, we need boundary adjustments across the district. We need the district to value and support our neighborhood schools. We need a long-term plan and an educational vision for our city. Instead of closures, we demand serious rethinking of our transfer policy. We have known for years that our transfer policy hurts neighborhood schools and that it increases segregation. The district's lottery system reinforces the damaging misperception that if you can transfer out, you should. With your leadership, we can create an environment in which schools unite our diverse communities. While the solutions we have to be multifaceted, fixing the transfer system is essential. We can't put this off another year. We would not be here today if the district had been more transparent about the long-term plan created for the Jefferson cluster 2 years ago without community involvement. These plans assumed and assured the failure of our cluster. Low capture rates were taken as a given, and plans were laid to close one school after another. I ask you to publicly scrap that document and the assumptions that went into it. Collaboratively, let's create a new long-term plan for our cluster, one that supports communities and fills all our neighborhood schools with opportunity and hope. Here are some ideas.
Thank you. You can provide us written testimony.
Good morning. My name is Paul Anthony. My 3 children are in the Spanish immersion program at Beach. I am also the chair of the Humboldt Neighborhood Association. That name may have some resonance for you. Last year you closed our community school. Today you are considering a plan that will close yet another community school, Chief Joseph. The City of Portland has just completed a multi-year process to write a long-term plan for the city. The Portland plan was developed in response to some of Portland's most pressing challenges, including income disparities and associated long-term health issues, high unemployment, and a low high school graduation rate. It reflects our common values and collective concern with equity. It was adopted by the city, but more importantly, in the present context, Portland Public Schools has pledged to be a good partner in carrying out the plan. I was present when Paul Cathcart made that pledge on your behalf to the Portland Planning Commission. The vision for future development, growth, and community investment described in the Portland plan is explicitly dependent on maintaining present school facilities and increasing the number of such facilities over time. Neighborhood schools are recognized as vital to student success and essential tools for combating long-term entrenched poverty. They are critical to changing patterns of behavior that will enable Portland to meet significant transportation and community health goals, and they are essential to maintaining and enhancing the quality of life in each neighborhood they serve. Today, it is considered self-evident that young people will be most successful if they are nurtured, raised, and educated in communities that are capable of meeting the needs of all the community's members. Neighborhood schools offer easier and safer access, greater familiarity and sense of security and ownership, and are the public facilities most well-positioned to rise to that challenge. To quote the plan, neighborhoods and communities that support intergenerational activities include the optimal blend of ingredients to improve the likelihood of positive outcomes for youth. Equally critical are the physical environments in which youth are raised. Youth must have safe homes and neighborhoods, affordable transit, safe bicycling and walking routes to school and other destinations, access to recreation and nature to improve their mental and physical health, with a corresponding benefit to their academic and social outcomes. The Portland Plan anticipates that the City of Portland will take concrete steps to leverage neighborhood schools to realize this vision of a comprehensive, nurturing community. Capitalize on the opportunities that public schools offer as honored places of learning, as well as multifunctional neighborhood anchors to serve local residents of all generations. The Portland Plan also anticipates concrete steps to ensure that neighborhood schools are recognized as a community resource and are made accessible to all members of the community, not less. Further eroding community safety, health, and vitality is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you.
The superintendent has told us this is not a closure. Please help us hold her accountable to that as a promise to also not close the school building. We know that a school is its people, but in this case it's also its neighborhood, and another closed building in our neighborhood is unacceptable. Please assure us that this will be a minimum of a 3-year investment in this dual campus, during which time a stakeholder task force can look into the feasibility of a future middle school in our cluster. 3 years will also provide or coincide, according to your own numbers, with schools in our cluster outgrowing their own facilities. Please invest in us by allowing us to grow. This proposal includes a tailor-made transfer policy for our future middle school, well, our middle school numbers. We've been told that Ockley had students wanting to transfer into their middle grades this year, and we're told there wasn't room. This flies directly in the face of what we've been told about where we need to be for our middle grade numbers, not to mention what we've been told about Ockley Green. Another caveat to an already inequitable transfer policy sends the message that we are, again, being singled out. Please ensure that any changes to transfers are equitable and district-wide. Please support this merge by maintaining the resource we need for a successful transition. The loss of pre-K and the loss of busing for some of our students will disproportionately affect those in our community, specifically the Ockley Green community, who need it the most. We need to come together to protect the most vulnerable among us. Please help us do that. Lastly, I'm asking again that the communities affected be allowed to engage in a real way. We are losing or have already lost faith that we can accomplish this through public process. Ensure that our teachers have a real voice. They are the adults that our kids see the most, and we need them to stay and walk them through this transition. We would like you to give them a reason to stay. Let us salvage some hope that all of this is not being done to downsize us and move bodies around. Help us keep the staff accountable for good outcomes for all of our children. Help us, help you make this a success story for our cluster.
I am also very thankful that special education has received some attention that we haven't seen in a very long time, and I hope it doesn't go away soon. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I look forward to working with our new special education director to find ways to better our relationship. So while I was writing this testimony, I was thinking of some questions. What do children with special needs want? What do they need? What do their parents want? What do their teachers need? Although it is often hazardous to generalize, I trust that you would agree with me in this answer. Children with special needs, their parents and their teachers, want and need the same thing: a free and appropriate education that will give these children the opportunity to maximize their potential and become productive members of this society. Right now, this isn't the case, but I believe PPS can make this happen. I'm a firm believer in inclusion. In my opinion, inclusion done appropriately in the general classrooms can lead to more than just educational advantages. Think for a moment about how amazing it is for a school to have students with and without special needs learning from each other. They can share their unique abilities, they can make friendships, and they can both start to build their community together. A community of acceptance, something we all should want. But in order for inclusion to be successful, it has to start from day one. It has to start when they take their first steps into a PPS building and be there for them when they take their last steps out. Children with special needs and disabilities deserve to be a part of a community like that. not just shuffled around from one placement to another every 2 to 3 years because their neighborhood school doesn't offer a program that fits their needs. You know what fits their needs? Having a school that cares. We should ask ourselves when to invest in these kids rather than how much they will cost, because the consequences are far greater than any cost. I would ask you today for equity in a system that is filled with past practices that need to be changed. I would like this board to make decisions based on truths. I would like to see a more collaborative plan that involves our community from the beginning. I think we could make a great team if you slowed this process down and gave us a chance to build something together like the community proposal that we will present to the board and to Superintendent Smith. I will end right now with a quote that I read the other day that really strikes home. Hard times don't make heroes, but through these hard times, the hero in us is revealed. I want you to do us a favor. Be our children's heroes and make the right choices.
There is nothing like raising children together to open people's hearts to each other, but that progress is slow and intimate and fragile. It happens in the tiniest moments in our yards, on our streets, and in our neighborhood schools. When you apply a process as swift and aggressive as enrollment balancing to our schools, to the places where we come together to educate and nurture our children, you do great damage to them, to our families, and to our communities. When you present the closure of Tubman and Humboldt as an emergency, yet we know that you were planning those closures for more than a year, we see that you are untrustworthy. When you waste our time for months and then present a plan that mirrors so much of the long-range plans you've kept hidden from us, we see that you don't respect us. When you continue to alienate our community with your public engagement process, we see that you would rather squander our energy and dedication than work with us. When your proposals fail to mitigate or even mention the impacts on our most vulnerable students, we see your alarming disregard for our children's well-being and rights. Members of the board, I am asking you to declare this enrollment balancing process a failure. It is time for this district to work with our community to develop and implement a long-term plan for our schools. We have provided you with many detailed suggestions and alternatives in writing. We are ready to help you make a radical change. I hope that you now are too.
I agree that co-locating access into King's School has to be an integrated solution in order to work. The access program has a long-term plan for itself. The parents do anyway. They want to grow to a 1,100 student school. They want their own building. They want their own program. I think that long-term growth plan could be accommodated with an intermediate step of integrating with King's School in the short term, but we have to acknowledge that just co-locating access in King by itself is not getting them towards their goals, and it's not getting King towards its goals of enrollment. King needs to grow. It should have been growing over the last several years. King has been in this situation for at least 6 years. King has always relied on transfers in to sustain its program, and therefore has never been given a neighborhood boundary with enough students to support it. So if access program does get its own building eventually, is allowed to grow, and King is meant to stay alive, we can't be in the single building competing against each other long term. I would also like to say about the access program that it appears to me from where I stand outside is that it is viewed by parents as a last resort to get tag education access for their kids. Even though it is only for the top 1% intellectually or test-wise, it is used, and parents are unsatisfied with tag instruction across the district. And if there are better tag services across the district, then the need for access wouldn't be so great. A parent was told, who had a tag child and was looking at applying for access, that you're in Alameda, why would you need to go to access? And the flip side of that, she was told this by district staff in the tag department. So the flip side of that is, well, if you're in King and you're a tag student, do you need access? What if you're in that top 1%? We know there are probably fewer tag students, or at least by the current method of identification in the Jefferson cluster than in wealthier parts of the city. And should we drain those students out of this cluster? Integrating the access program with King and sharing the results and not building a color line in the school is probably the only way to make this work.
Our most prominent African American leader said, "There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe nor politic nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it is right." Martin Luther King Jr. As a Chief Joseph parent filling out the final survey that presented me with 2 enrollment balancing options, I was encouraged. I had hope that I'd be listened to. I'm not sure I have that same hope now with this surprising new proposal, but I want to trust your intent. Forgive me if that's proving difficult. Turning Ockley Green into a junior middle college with curriculum that flows directly into the Jefferson Middle College curriculum actually makes sense. I started to envision Jefferson as a high school that people are transferring to get into instead of out of, where those trying to get in would have to wait in line behind junior college Ockley Green students who are already assured a spot at this wonderful high school. Even the idea of closing Ockley Green for 9 months and coming back with new curriculum, new leadership, higher expectations, even a new name makes sense to me. All of this would go a long way in bolstering its damaged reputation. Yes, it would be a disruptive 9 months, but a disruption of 9 months for a few must be worth it to give all current and future children a level playing field and maybe even an advantage for once. I was born and raised in North Portland. I attended Beach, Ockley Green, and I graduated from this wonderful school 23 years ago. I always hoped my children would attend Jefferson as well, although I couldn't have anticipated the state the school district would be in. And although PPS is one district, let's be honest, we're talking about a disparity in the inner east side that has existed as long as I can remember. Somehow, our west side counterparts never seem to be faced with these kinds of disruptions to their children's education.
Pertenezco a la escuela King.
I belong to King School.
Y antes de empezar con mi discurso,
Before I begin with my presentation,
traigo un mensaje de mi niña Juliana de segundo grado,
I bring a message from my daughter Juliana, second grader,
donde dice, la escuela King es una familia y mis maestros y mi directora son mis principales padres.
her message is King School is a family, and my teachers and my principal are my parents.
Bueno, como ya le dije, soy Rafael Hernández. Soy una madre voluntaria como muchas más de la escuela King.
Like I said, I am a parent from King School. I'm a volunteer parent, like a lot of parents at King School.
Del área de Jefferson, con 3 niños cursando los niveles secundaria, primaria y prekinder.
And like other volunteer parents in the Jefferson area schools, I am a parent volunteer, and I have 3 kids ranging from pre-K, primary grades, and middle school.
Esta mañana vengo a hablarles nuevamente que tomen conciencia en todo este caos.
Again, I'm here to speak to you again to be conscious about what you're doing with all this chaos.
Que si siguen llevando que aún paren, pero de verdad y trabajen realmente para mejorar el nivel de calidad dentro de las escuelas.
If you are continuing with the intent that you are going to improve the quality of education in all the schools,
de nuestro vecindario,
in our neighborhood,
el cierre o el reacomodo no son la forma correcta.
The closure or to rearrange the school is not the correct way to do it.
Al contrario, está llevando a una sobrepoblación.
On the contrary, it's going to create an overpopulation.
En algunos y en otros el cierre.
Overpopulation in some schools, and for other schools, a closure.
El evaluar es ubicar los niños que han estado. ¿Sí entiende? Okay.
Sorry.
El balancear es ubicar los niños que ya están sobrepoblados.
To balance the schools is to place the kids that are in schools that are overpopulated.
Las escuelas ubicándolos
in placing them in schools that lack the number of students.
En donde hay falta de estudiantes. Porque cada niño trae consigo un costo para su educación y a su vez un pago seguro de sus maestros.
Because each child brings with him or her the cost of education and the pay for his or her teacher.
Trabajen realmente como lo hacemos el PTA.
Work really how we do it in the PTA.
Recaudando fondos para materiales para su conformidad de los niños y a su vez al rendimiento académico.
Working to raise funds for more materials for the school, for the children, and at the same time for their academic achievement.
Ustedes trabajen también con el gobierno o asociaciones ricas para recaudar el fondo que se necesita.
Do work with the government and with associations or organizations that have means to raise the finances that are needed.
Trabajen para fortalecer la educación, no para matarla.
Work to strengthen education, not to kill it.
Thank you.
Como lo hace para apoyar a otras tareas.
The way that you do it to support other work.
Que están quitando a la educación.
That it taking away from education.
Ms. Rafael, we're at time. Thank you.
Es bastante, pero necesitamos nosotros realmente que ustedes nos tomen en cuenta.
I know it's a lot, but what we really need from you is that you take us into account.
Porque Access necesita un espacio real.
Because Access needs a real space.
Y al unirlo no lleva a nada bueno.
And to bring us together won't lead to anything good.
Unlike the vast majority of PPS parents, when I drop my daughter off in her kindergarten classroom each morning, I am reminded of the segregation the school choice system has caused in our district. At King, my daughter is the only white student in her classroom. When we drop off, it's a dramatic event. My daughter is welcomed. I get smiles and hugs. It has touched my heart. The other day, my daughter shared with my wife and I that she was famous. That her classmates thought she was beautiful, and this warmed our hearts. That she was so accepted by her classmates in her school. There was also a bit of something troubling that has driven me to do the work, to learn about race and the dynamics that I've seen as a charter school teacher and administrator and worker going to my neighborhood school and seeing a very vast contrast.
In the recommendation, it also speaks to, at the end of the transition, all students would attend the Ockley Green campus and the Chief Joseph campus would close. So here are some questions and concerns that I have. First off, what measurable goals do you plan on accomplishing during this transition time? What specific indicators are you using to define the end of the transition? I also want to know exactly how you intend to gather community and staff input about the future leadership of this school. And I want to know exactly who and how that final decision is going to be made. As far as the Ockley Green campus itself, I want to know if you intend to and if you have the funding to get that facility up and running to its full potential, which is including a wood shop, the theater, recording studio that I hear is over there, a cafeteria that would accommodate students. I also want to remind you that the Chief Joseph community came out strongly in favor of a middle school option for our cluster. If you intend to move forward with this recommendation in a K through 8, you need to convince us that you will provide us with the resource to be strong and successful. That means you need to show us that you actually know what the numbers are that we need to have a strong core curriculum as well as the enrichments. How likely is it that we are going to meet these numbers? And can we meet these numbers as a dual campus over the next several years? So I am more than willing to support our local school, but I need you to meet us halfway.
Thank you.
Closing the building is unnecessary now, and I believe unnecessary in even 3 years as our neighborhood continues to thrive and grow. You only need to drive down Interstate Avenue and MLK to witness the growth. Guarantee equity for the merged school by allowing transfers in. The transfer policies must be applied with fairness throughout the district. We, as a community, have an obligation to assure good outcomes for all children. That obligation includes caring for our most fragile students, including those with special needs. This board needs to require that special ed students are not displaced during this process, no matter how few there are. Every child deserves our consideration. Finally, this board should only approve a plan that includes concrete measures for success, overseen by a group of parents, teachers, administrators, and community members. We have a right to know exactly what the goals beyond filling buildings are, and as a public-owned organization, we have the right to ask for this accountability.
This process has been really frustrating and scary for all of us, but I do feel like you guys are listening, and even though this process has been frustrating and scary, it also gives me a great deal of hope because of the energy that it has created. So I wanted to say, firstly, keep all of our neighborhood schools. They are the heart of our diverse communities. I also would like to say that we need to, in the near future, create a middle school in this cluster. We will shortly have the numbers to support this, okay? And I feel like these short-term solutions are destabilizing, demoralizing, and I will believe that we will actually end up losing money from these short-term solutions in the long run. So if we can just stay the course, we will save our communities and build trust and save money. I also wanted to say that we need to adjust the transfer policy and the boundaries to stabilize our capture rates, rather than boundary and transfer policies that create segregated, inequitable schools. And lastly, I wanted to say that this process has created a tremendous unity and energy in this community. The best possible course of action right now would be to harness the energy that you have created and focus it in a positive direction to revitalize our cluster. I think with the energy and the passion of this community that our cluster could actually be the best place in Portland to go to school.
I do feel like you put at the forefront of your proposals the marginalized and many of the students and families who have been through these closures. I am thrilled also that you haven't recommended any closures at this time. We've lived through the past where schools got closed and that was it. And I know for Woodlawn, if our school would have been closed, our children would have been kind of scattered to the four winds. So naturally, I'm not a proponent of any more school closures in the Jefferson cluster because we have had so many of them. But I do thank you for listening. I thank you for being honest about the issues that we have faced in our cluster, the historical issues, the current issues. And I thank you, especially why I feel hopeful is for the first time, I feel like a superintendent is addressing directly the transfer policy. You have brought this up in your proposal that we do need to look at this transfer policy under the umbrella of the district's new outstanding, I'm about to say equity policy. I mean, this board passed an equity policy that is phenomenal. And for that reason, I'm here also to advocate and it's just really repeating what so many of the other speakers here today have said, that unless something is done about the transfer policy, we will keep having the have and the have-not schools. We will keep having students who have barriers that other students don't have to encounter. Currently, I would imagine about 50% of all of our resources are being transferred out. And so no matter how hard the staffs work, the parents work, and everyone else, if half of our resources are being allowed to be diverted, it will be the same thing. And being an educator myself, I also am thinking about all of the children, district-wide, not just Jefferson, but we do have to look at the boundaries. We do have to look at the transfer policy, and at least for neighborhood schools, make sure that they are equitable.
I am a teacher at Vernon Elementary, and I also have 4 children that go to Woodlawn, one of which is a special needs child with spina bifida. I just want to start by saying when I met with my son's team at Woodlawn, they took notice of my son, they had respect for my son, and most importantly, when my son came home, he was smiling and he was happy to be in school. My son knows that he's different. He has a twin brother that he watches fly around the house while he can't. So it was clear to him at an early age that he knew he was different. And then when I got to Woodlawn and we're talking to the teachers, the occupational therapists, and the adapted physical education teacher, it became very clear to me that this is not just a ragtag bunch of people who are working together. This is a team. It's a team, a multidisciplinary team who cares about my son's well-being. Not just because I'm a teacher and I might know a little bit of jargon about IEPs, but because they truly care. I also want to speak a little bit, pardon me, I don't have a prepared speech, but I want to speak about my upbringing. I went to Jefferson High School. I went to Harriet Tubman Middle School. I graduated in the class of 2000. One of my biggest regrets is in 1998 when I transferred out of Jefferson, my neighborhood school, because they didn't offer the marketing program that I wanted to be a part of. So I ended up going to Cleveland. I have nothing against Cleveland. I got a great education at Cleveland High School, but I was not treated like a family member. When I got there, I was specifically targeted as the Jeff kind of kid that, you know, we didn't really want. I knew a few people that came from the Jefferson neighborhood area that were allowed to go there, again, and it was through the transfer policy. So although it did help me in my graduation and the fact that I was able to get into the program that I wanted to get into, looking back now, I would have much rather graduated from my neighborhood high school. One of the things, the sentiments that I want to echo is that there is a lot of pride in this neighborhood. I was the kid who was considered the ghetto kid, the African-American kid who was the stereotype of what Jefferson was thought to have been. And I can tell you now that there is a pride, not just in our community, but in the cluster.
Go ahead. All right. Hi, my name's Katie Asher. I'm the chair of the Arbor Lodge Neighborhood Association. I thank you for having me today. Arbor Lodge contains campuses for 2 thriving school communities, Chief Joseph and Ockley Green. The Arbor Lodge Neighborhood Association board and membership has been observing and discussing this process for months, and most recently we hosted an open forum with over 40 Ockley Green and Chief Joseph parents and community members to discuss the future of our neighborhood schools. After months of engaging our community, we are deeply concerned at the direction the school board is poised to take in Arbor Lodge. North and Northeast Portland have a sordid history with Portland public school system shuffling and restructuring schools all too often. Among the most affected by these changes are students, such as those currently at Ockley Green who rely on school busing and students with special needs, in short, disadvantaged students who rely on schools to develop their resilience. In addition to a quality education, schools should provide a stable community for students where parents can plan for their future of their children, gutting Ockley Green's magnet and special education programs, as well as the proposed eventual closure of Chief Joseph, do just the opposite. Further, the demographics of our neighborhood are changing, and the number of families with school-age children and children on the way are growing. Recent census data show that while there has been a drop in K-8 students in Arbor Lodge, there has been a 28% increase in adults aged 25 to 34, which strongly suggests a coming increase in school-age children. We need a viable, livable, and equitable solution for the future that takes into account coming changes in student population. The school board has already indicated that in the next 3 years they will be reevaluating their transfer policy and enrollment across the district, meaning that these students and communities would very soon be disrupted again. We urge in the strongest possible terms that the school board keep both campuses at Ockley Green and Chief Joseph Schools open, especially during the next 3 years as the district reevaluates its own policies. In the recently released background report for our city's 30-year vision, the Portland Plan, schools are identified as central to community vitality, neighborhood identity, and the well-being of Portlanders. The plan also recognizes public schools as multifunctional neighborhood anchors, serving local residents of all generations. When families invest in a school, they also invest in local businesses, homes, parks, and playgrounds, in essence, building and anchoring a neighborhood, our neighborhood. Families build ties as they volunteer in the neighborhood and as their children bike, walk, and carpool together to school. This creates resilience in the face of modern challenges. Superintendent Smith's recommendation for the Jefferson cluster threatens to cut our neighborhood anchors and scatters families to the wind, jeopardizing our neighborhood ecosystem. We demand that Portland Public Schools put a stop to hasty closures until they can develop a viable, equitable, and long-term solution.
When I come to school early at 7:30, I drive by a bus and there are students that are waiting at 6 in Alberta, and every day I see these students get on. These are students whose parents are waiting for them in strollers, and they're walking home clearly because they live in the neighborhood, but this bus takes them somewhere else. And I still don't know where that bus goes, but I know those kids don't go to King, and they live in our neighborhood. So if I feel like my school, King, is not good enough for these students, imagine how my students feel. And my students are way smarter than me. They know what's going on. They are very perceptive. So, I think we need to think about that. And last, Carol, Ms. Smith, you've seen an assembly, you've seen me on stage, and the spirit that our students have. We are a family here at King. We are passionate. My junior coaches, I have my parents back here of some of my junior coaches, and they are phenomenal students that inspire our children every single day. And I would welcome you to come to our King recess and really see how we are a family doing cheers and playing and learning how to interact with each other every day. Thank you very much.
We have been part of the Magnet program at Ockley Green since kindergarten. So we've known for a while that our program will be closed. So in that sense, we kind of have a jump start on the grieving process. We're kind of ahead of the curve a little bit as far as anticipating change. So I'm coming from a position where I know we're going to have to change, and I'm kind of going to go from that. So I'm here for 2 reasons. I have 2 requests of you. Number one, this Ockley Green community is tight-knit. These kids have been through a lot. We've chosen to be together, and they are a really close bunch of kids. I work in the library. I see them every day, and I volunteer in the library. And they are a tight-knit group. We can't lose those kids. They can't lose that stability. To take away our busing, to offer us the option of staying with the cohort but then remove the busing is not only disingenuous, but it seems to be against the racial equity policy. I'm very concerned that's a big chunk that we'll lose. Our special ed kids will be literally scattered. There's multiple placements there. We don't know what's going to happen to them. So we want to stay together. We love our community, and we are adaptive. We're ready to change, but we need to make sure that we're not pawns and that we're not going to be, you've heard the term scattered to the wind a lot. So please help us stay together in any way that we can. My second request is that if this proposed merge goes forward, I would like to see a plan where you guys help us facilitate this merge. We have 2 very vibrant, awesome communities coming together that don't know very much about each other. A lot of things that I know about Chief Joseph I'm learning are not true, and I'm finding when I talk to Chief Joseph parents for the first time, a lot that they know about Ockley Green is not true, outdated, whatever. So please help us facilitate that merge of community. As parents, we're starting to make great strides with that already, but we can't do it by ourselves. We need to see how that's going to work. We need to see how our dual campus is going to be a true community, not just two separate schools. And Chief Joseph parents, I invite you guys, come to Ockley, come talk to me. My son is just as scared about the merge as little Felix is. But really, the more we talk to each other, get in each other's buildings, help make this happen, I think we can really achieve something that is amazing, diverse, celebrated, not just in the Jefferson cluster, but honestly in the entire city of Portland, and I'm really excited to get started on that.
Once the school was gone, young families didn't want to live in that part of town anymore because there was no convenient school. There was busing, there was all the rest of it. But it changed the population of that neighborhood of my previous town. It became a place where single people were very happy to live, but families were not. Now, as I have observed Arbor Lodge in the last year, it is a growing community with a really quite amazing number of young families with young children moving in. It's on my particular block, and the older people are aging out and they're being replaced by people who are attracted by the neighborhood itself, by the fact that Chief Joseph is physically located pretty much in the center of the neighborhood.
We have learned the Jefferson cluster has suffered too many school closures and too much muddling for too long. We have learned that there is a correlation between parents, transferring their students out of their neighborhood schools and the percentage of students of color at that school. We have learned that systematic racism has a major impact on the achievement of students of color. I stand with you and your commitment not to tolerate those inequities any longer, and by doing so, I encourage all of us to seize the task of equity together. Hold tight that our schools are a lifeline for students carrying the weight of poverty. Never forget that schools can free a student from the chains of a disability. Honor that our schools can empower a student with the knowledge that they are not defined by the color of their skin. Black, brown, yellow, hermit green, and even white, but by the character that is in their heart. Celebrate with me the strength and beauty of our cluster. It is the diversity of our families and our students.
I think this process, just in a week, just a dozen, 15 people getting together to put our best ideas on the table, I just wish that's how this process had started out. Because people here are ready to solve problems, they have great ideas. That's the way our public process should be run and can be run.
And this is tricky knowing that we're in an enrollment balancing which might result in closures, but I've made a commitment to myself to make sure that folks realize that our state legislators right now are working on our behalf to look at funding for all sorts of services. And just a reminder that the current budget, which is the first budget that was put out, is the governor's proposal, and it takes some serious steps towards making progress. But it would result currently in a 16.9 or about $17 million reduction for Portland Public Schools. And that it creates a lot of challenges. So I want to highlight that as something that, as we continue through this process, that we also continue to have discussions about other issues that will affect students across our district.